Hello, everybody. Good to see smiling faces, well fed, hopefully going to be happy, not hungry for our session here today. Super excited to be here for this fireside chat. I do wish we had a fire and a fireplace, but I'm super excited to be here. I'm Lauren Chesley. I'm with SiriusXM. I am the retail head of industry. I also focus on restaurants. What does that mean? Essentially, as we think about the advertising landscape and audio in particular, consumers are spending 31% of their time with audio, but brands are only spending 9% of their budgets, and with retail, it's actually a lot smaller. So my focus is really thinking about how do we bring audio entertainment, audio content, audio conversations, and audio advertising to life in an omni-channel way. And so wherever that footprint brings people, be it live events and experiences, be it in streaming music, content and conversations and podcasts, et cetera. So I have the pleasure of being here today to talk about the omni-channel revolution, specifically bricks to clicks. And I'm here with these delightful ladies from Target. So I'm super excited to introduce Jasmine Vazquez, VP of Marketing, focused on brand. And then I have Mary Beth George with me as well. She is also a VP in Marketing, focused on store experience. So ladies, I'm going to actually kick it over to you. You've got a wealth of experience. And I think as we talk about the omni-channel evolution and all the ways in which brands change and have to transform and make sure they're relevant from a consumer context, these ladies have had a wealth of experience at Target, and it's been so fun because I've been their coworkers because I was with Target for 13 years, and now I'm a client support partner from this side of the house, and it's just really awesome to see their experiences. So I will kick it to you, Jasmine, to share a little bit about your background as we get started.
Yeah, absolutely. As Lauren said, I'm Jasmine Vazquez, and I don't like to talk numbers, so I'll just say I have over 2 decades of experience in retail and in marketing. But when you work for an organization like Target, there's so many facets to it. So I have launched own brands. I have led really big brand initiatives. We've worked before Mary Beth, I was on the store experience marketing side and really revolutionizing what that experience meant to the consumer and the guest. And now I oversee our brand marketing side, marketing strategy, our inclusive marketing arm, along with, sports marketing initiatives and a few other things. And so one of the biggest changes that we're seeing is a really big dynamic and shift with our guests and where they shop and how they shop, especially because Target's known for stores. So that's a little bit about me, and I'll pass it over to Mary Beth.
Thanks, Jasmine. I lead our store experience marketing team. I, too, have been with Target a very long time. And my bio basically mirrors Jasmine's in that I've kind of followed her around the org in my tenure there. And, we've seen a big evolution, especially as we think about, obviously, the digital evolution, but then how stores have transformed. And we're going to hit on that today. But really, even my role has expanded, as Lauren touched on the role of audio. And, we're not just thinking about visually what you see and experience in a Target store, but how you bring all of that together. So we'll get into that in more depth.
Absolutely. So the content of this conversation is really focused on wherever people shop, we want to be there. So Target looks at that holistic point of view from a guest standpoint, be it shopping with the app, .com, in stores, et cetera. I think worth noting, because as we've had these conversations, we've been in a lot of conference contents throughout the last 3-4 years. The focus has really been on e-commerce, right? Rightfully so, because that's the new behaviors. That's often where people didn't have a strong strategy in the past. But as we think about the way that people are shopping, this has been mentioned a little bit before, but in the total revenue that is going towards retail, we have less than 20% actually happening from an e-commerce standpoint. And while they might be researching and coming and weaving in, 80% or more is happening in the stores, and Target really has that nailed. And so I really want to focus on the experience of the stores to kick us off, because I think that really, when we talk about the consumer experience and the guest experience specific to Target, is really the sweet spot for how people are engaging. So I'm going to kick it to Mary Beth. I'd love to get your vantage point on the role of the store. And as an FYI, this is going to be show and tell. And so we've got some really good visuals that we'll hit on as we're talking about these topics. So I'm going to bring up the store.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Lauren, the stores are still at the epicenter of everything we do as a brand. And via COVID, while you certainly saw that digital ramp up, because guests want ease. They wanted, to not leave their home through many different occasions. We've also seen a resurgence in our guests wanting to escape and have a place where they can truly experience in community what our brand is about and other brands that we bring into our store. So as such, we think about all of the senses that we need to activate to really be able to inspire, to bring joy, and to move from just a simple transaction to a meaningful and at times emotional experience. So we do that, again, thinking about sound. What is the music you might hear in a Target store? What are the things you can touch and taste and smell? How do we make sure that we're giving you a real reason to come in and then share about that experience because it really exceeded your expectations?
I love that. That's super helpful. How many people go into a Target store and all of a sudden time disappears, right? Like literally you're in there for so long and then all of a sudden the basket, we joked about that all the time when I was there. You go in for 3 things and you leave with 30 and all of a sudden you're like, where did this happen? We have these 2 to thank for that. So I love talking about the stores as community builders. Oftentimes, especially as we look at younger generations, people are gathering there, they're lingering, they're having the social experiences, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. But can you share a little bit about the role of community within the store and how you're thinking about building that and bringing that to life?
Yeah. There's a lot of different facets of it. One is all guests want to see themselves in the store environment. They want to feel like this is a place for me. Target sees me, I'm home, right? So that's certainly one facet of it. But then the other is people coming together for like-minded things, whether it be a product launch. I can't see the visuals that we're showing very well. If you go to the next slide, I think, some of the events that we've been bringing forward for our guests in the store really touch on this. We bring forward not just what's the new e.l.f. lip balm, but how do you actually try it on in a community of other e.l.f. fans and get really excited about what that experience is together. Similarly with Kendra Scott, I know we have examples up there as well, right? She has a big brand community that surrounds her brand, that advocates for her brand, and to be able to experience something new in a Target store with those who are just as excited about it as you are, is really what we're trying to foster.
Yeah, and I think what Target does really well too is you think about all the brands that you bring in and then the own brands that you host as well. There's all that change and that newness each time you come into the store experience. So when you couple community with that and then you couple senses and activating that, it really does build that memory. So Bloomingdale's talked about that, right? When you are engaging with other people, you're in a connection point, that is a memory building moment. And then when you're activating more of the senses, selfishly audio being a big part of that, you have recall, you have physiological impacts, you have sensorial touch points that then stick with you longer than you would if it were just a single access point in. So I think that you all do that extremely well. And then for the Kendra Scott, I'm going to play a little video so you can just see what that experience in particular looked like. I think when you're thinking about moments like this, these are drops, certainly, right? Moments in time where new brands come into the store's ecosystem, the online ecosystem. There's a calendarization of that. You want to make sure it's editorial. You want to make sure it's connected to culture. There was a lot of nostalgia and how that shows up today, and then newness all together. I'd be curious, too, between the two of you, how are you thinking about the cultural calendar and editorializing what shows up in the Target experience and bringing that to life from a cultural standpoint?
I might jump in here and then I'll kick it over to you,
Yep.
Mary Beth, to give some examples. I mean, what's hard about a cultural calendar is there's so many subcultures, and so you really need to know who your consumer is, what they're interested in. At Target specifically, what we find is just the steady drumbeat of newness and accessibility tends to win across all of our guests. But that could be anywhere from a National Donut Day to a much bigger season. And so while we've relied on the much bigger seasons in the past, I think what we're learning is you need to go a little bit deeper and be a bit more relevant. And then this intersection of culture is really important. And culture comes through in 2 ways. Kind of what's happening in the world through entertainment, celebrities, key brands, but then also what comes through from the guest throughout social media and some of the actual trends that they're starting to develop. I'm going to kick it over to Mary Beth because her team actually did an incredible job with the launch of an artist and just how they started to create and bring that fandom into the store.
Yeah, it's a great example of that kind of click down that you mentioned, right? There's the obvious seasons that we're known for, and you're organically driven to a Target store to stock up for Valentine's Day or Easter. But it's these moments that really resonate with our guests, and as that we think about the intersection of artists, other brands that make sense with our brand. This one's a good example where, and also highlights this whole omni-channel ecosystem that we're talking about. And I think I don't know if we have the video in there or not, so it's a little long, so we don't have to play the whole thing, but it's a story of a super fan of Olivia Rodrigo. And, he could have simply just bought her new release in our app or on the site, but he saw there's going to be an event happening about Olivia Rodrigo at the Target store. I'm going to go there. I'm going to be in community with other super fans. I'm super excited to see what's going on. He goes and he has such an awesome experience because he's surprised and delighted. We can show what happened at the store, and he talks about it on our behalf, right? And that's what we're trying to create is you learn about something via social, you get into the store, you're immersed with this awesome experience, you're listening to her music, you're having an experience beyond your expectation, and then you're sharing on our behalf. So
I think Carol from Ag talked about, that flywheel.
yeah.
And I think this is a really good example of that.
You get the idea.
Lots of excitement. But you touched on it, right? That's the surprise and delight moment. You go expecting the product. You go expecting, hey, this is a new drop. I'm super excited about it. And then surprise, you have this exchange with an artist that you are obsessed with that then creates a movement for yourself that you want to share with other people that then creates chatter. And that's such a special way to engage with a brand, build brand advocacy, build brand love, get excited about the next thing that's coming into the store. And that's really what Target has mastered for a long time, right? The drop. How many of you all have engaged with a limited time offer, right? The collaborations, the partnerships that Target has, that's a really special way to say, I have urgency to get to this experience. I log in at 3 a.m, oftentimes when the stores aren't open, to see if I can get the product, if I'm lucky, right? Because you have other people logging on at night to get on the app, get on .com to get these special drops, and then go to the store to see how it's merchandised and to see if they can get more stuff too. So there's a sense of surprise, delight, and connection in all of that. And we think about that seasonally oftentimes, right? So obviously we are on the heels of holiday. I feel like with retailers, as soon as the season closes, you're planning for the next one. So curious as you're looking back, thinking about the successes and the experience of holiday, how did that come to life in the omnichannel experience and particularly live events? Because I think that was a really special way that Target surprised and delighted the consumers and had that context for guests in all these different cities across the country.
Yeah, you might be looking at some of this and saying, okay, you started with the store. What does this have to do with the omni-channel revolution and bricks to clicks? And I think a lot of it is you have to be where the guest is. So obviously Target has equity in the store. We want to continue to build on that. But we have to continue to evolve and revolutionize the future of retail. That is something that we take very seriously with Mary Beth and her team. The other piece is the guest is in social. They're advocating. They are actually telling us what they want. And so we know that that's where we need to be. We also realize that while we have this equity in stores, we're in the same boat as many of you and what we've heard today, which is how are you going to continue to grow digitally? And we've approached that in a few different ways. One, we've started to revamp our site. And so that same magic that you find and feel in the store, you're going to start to feel that in your app, within our social content, within the site itself. But then we're also going out into the world and trying to draw those associations differently. So we actually partnered with Google. It's a smaller image up at the top, but there was a Google ad, and then there was a Target dog in pet PJs. And you see the woman kind of see the pet PJs, and she types into Google, shop Target holiday PJs for pets. And then it actually pops over onto the site, onto the Target ad, and start to say, searching Target PJs, and it pulls up all of the examples of that. And so it's starting to draw that association that Target is more than just a store. We are everywhere and can be accessed by everyone, especially when proximity is an issue. And then we started to go back to our roots with creating these bigger than life experiences, one that we call Wonderland. And so it's reimagining what it feels like to shop for toys. And so we had these 3 events across LA, Dallas, and New York. It was here in Hudson Yards. And we brought to life this experiential moment where kids could play Nintendo, they could look at the top toys, they could shop the top toys, they could add things to their list. And all of that drove to our site. And it was free. And so I think the line was about 2.5 hours by the time we were through the end of it. But we started to see a lot of that return onto the site. And then we also connected them into Circle and got them into our membership and into our app, which is, I think somebody talked about the stat of like, if you don't engage them effectively, 91% of people will delete your app. That actually stood out to me because we know that we need to continue to re-engage guests along the way. And then last but not least, we're always trying to figure out how to keep surprising our guests even outside of the store. And so this year, for the first time ever, I know the Sphere is a big venue that a lot of people have interest in, but we created the first life-size snow globe in Las Vegas. And so you see what all the billboards are in Las Vegas, and you see this really big magical display of Bullseye. And it was about 7 stories tall. And so drawing that attention and then also driving that within our social and digital channels.
I love it. And it's such an imprint where you see something in the physical world, but then you want to go digitally and explore, right? So you see the snow globe, you see the Target Bullseye, it was 97% when I was there. It's probably 100% at this point, but brand recognition is super high, but then it's like, oh, wow, what else is Target doing, right? And you go to all the source points to be able to pull that content out in the relevant places. So it might be social first for somebody, it might be the app first, et cetera. So a really cool way to captivate across all the channels and the spaces that you all play really well in. We know that, again, planned and unplanned. So how many of you all have seen or heard or maybe purchased one of the Stanley Cups that are all the rage right now? A couple hands in the audience, right? So this is kind of a planned, obviously from a merchandising and a partnership standpoint, but the unplanned chatter and the social ecosystem with which this lives in, like, mind-blowing, right? And I shouldn't be surprised by this. Target is a master at this, but I mean, look at the headlines. It's just fascinating to see how a singular product can create such conversation and connection and craze, in a sense, in a good sense of the word. Can you tell us a little bit more about just that type of an experience and how Target thinks about that or engages that?
Well, for those of you that have kids, I mean, did any of your children put together the PowerPoint presentation of like, this is my gift list? Then there was the Gen Z gift list that was going around. After we analyzed that list, we're like, we have about 90% of these products and these items. So what are ways that we can start to drive demand around some of these items that we have specifically? And so we knew that there was a new Stanley drop coming in. We knew it was going to come a little bit later. We negotiated with Stanley. And decided to make it an in-store traffic driver during the last 10 days when we knew digital demand was going to go down a little bit. So we started posting about that. Mary Beth's team did a phenomenal job of pulling together an experience to be able to meet that demand. And the numbers, I mean, there is something to be said about when you make something exclusive, you actually limit the appeal. And the access to it, that it actually drives more of a pent-up demand. And then actually Christmas Eve, we ended up having it online and available to ship. And those numbers also came back in like double-digit growth beyond what we thought we were going to have. And so what we did is we pulled something up based on the relevancy, started to sell it sooner, and that demand has continued. I don't know where all of those Stanley mugs are going to end up with all of the colors. And then we knew on the heels we had the Starbucks mug coming as well. And so that it's an interesting test, but it's also one that we are really cautious about. I think anytime you limit the way a guest wants to shop, if they want to buy it through Drive Up or they want to ship it versus going to the store, we know we could potentially lose a trip. So we were really selective on the types of items that we'll continue to do that with.
Super smart. And what you touch on in there too is listening and learning and evolving, right? So as we look ahead, we're first month of 2024. What are some of the things that are advice to the audience? Like, how do we think about evolving who we are as marketers? How do we think about the evolution of the guests and the experience that we can co-create with them ultimately?
I mean, I think we've touched on it with this concept of the flywheel, But it's not enough to just make sure that your site and store look the same and feel the same, but to really be activating against all those touch points in the way that leans into how your consumer, or our case, our guest, wants to interact. So you touched on it with social listening is kind of like the first touch point for everything we do. And then it ends up there as well. And we want to make sure we're the thing, whether it's a product drop or an experience at Target that people are talking about. So it's thinking through all of it, leaning into the guest journey, and making sure that it's not just about the creative matching, but the experience really enhancing how they're already shopping.
I love that. Yeah, we talk about an ecosystem and making sure there's authenticity no matter the touch point, because social is good for certain things, audio is good for certain things, and store is good for certain things. And so how do you tap into that authentic experience in all those places, connect the dots with the brand and how it feels, but bring it to life in a nuanced way based on where you're showing up. I love that. Just want to do a quick pulse. Do we have time for questions? So if there's any questions in the audience.
Whether intentionally or unintentionally, Target has created I'm going to call it the mom Target run, right? Like the self-care moment. How do you leverage that? How do you activate that? How do you take advantage of that?
I can talk about it from the store. That's part of our sweet spot, right? That is why guests love us, and we definitely try to harness it. It is that notion that I touched on escapism. It's not just a chore to go to Target. It's an escape. It's a moment of inspiration. It can be a moment of fun. It's very true for the mom guest, but also, as we touched on here, teens, tweens. It's an outing. It's a let's go hang out as a girl group. And we lean into all of that. And so it's making sure we're, as I said, igniting the senses that really bring that experience to life. It's making sure that it is easy, that we're not creating friction throughout that journey and throughout that experience. But that we're also thinking beyond just a transaction, right? It's through these events, through these moments, but also just even as simple as the way we display the product. It's coming to Target every time. You should see something, and this is why the effect that we have happens that you didn't have on your list, and you're like, oh, I gotta have this. And that part is very intentional, how we set that up and how we draw you in that way.
I think it's really understanding your guest deeply. And so to Mary Beth's point, we definitely have the mom trips, and we call them the stroller moms. They come in, they grab their coffee, they get the things on their list, and then they kind of just justify that because then they go around the corner, they take a peek at home, they take a peek at beauty, and then they always end up throwing a few impulse items in their basket. One, it's behavioral science. We always talk about removing that cognitive load from the guests, that they're able just to go into autopilot, but then keep that routine going in the store. And then it's just in the stories that we tell them where they are. So right now, the lines are completely blurred between I'm going to spend a few minutes on Instagram or TikTok, and then, oh, wait, I'm buying something in the next second. So having those really relevant stories, knowing what they're interested in, and making it so easy for them just to click to buy. Or if they're not doing that, whatever they see in the store, somebody talked about pulling the app out while they're shopping, making that app experience so easy, especially when you're in the store, that it's easy to find whatever they need. We tend to find that guests use their app to find in stocks, go to a different store, do a different drive up. And so making it that simple, but it's also the balance of making things super easy so that they don't have to think about it, but then also continually architecting it so that they're adding into their basket along the way.
It's ease, inspiration, joy. Those are words that as I hear that, that's what comes to mind. And Target, of course, that's the magic of not just Target, but Target.
So working in influencer marketing, I'm very curious to know, how do creators play a part in your overall omni-channel strategy?
I mean, I think many in the room, they're increasingly playing a large part. We were talking about this in a roundtable this morning where we've tested content straight from Target on platform, organic, paid, plus when we give a brief to an influencer or an affiliate. and the results are resoundingly coming from people want to hear from other people what they recommend. And so we're definitely starting to see a shift in that, and we're investing that way. I think what we also see is that advocacy, sometimes we have to pay for it and sometimes we don't. So it actually doesn't take a lot for us to invest in affiliates and influencers. With Stanley, we didn't have to do a whole lot. There's a lot that just kind of like happens in that flywheel and that groundswell. So we also need to understand what are our objectives and what are we trying to accomplish? Where do we need that leverage with the influencers, and where maybe don't we? And we can do some of that on our own.
I have one ad that just personally I love is the UGC. Target does such a phenomenal job. Like when I'm on .com or on the app, I love seeing the pictures of just like your everyday influencer posting the product that I'm considering buying, because it humanizes it, and it kind of makes me see it on different body types and how they style things too. So there's the influencer in the common sense of the word, but I think the influencer in terms of how we all show up and what our community is. And so it's like that really beautiful exchange with the guests that brings who they are into your ecosystem as well.
You spurred my mind on that one example. So there was actually a woman, she did a really cute TikTok, and it was like her in one outfit, all green. She pops through, she had the red version of this blazer in a whole red outfit, and then she was sitting on a step. We actually found it through UGC. We ended up putting it on our site. We ended up putting it in our app. And a lot of that content is so well made that you actually end up using it, and it actually connects all of those ecosystems as well. So you brought that up as you were talking about that.
So good. Dangerous, actually.
It's authentic too.
We do end up going back, yes.
You get their consent.
We do, but when you think about a production shoot for certain things compared to what it might take to do outreach and pay, it's very different.
And I think in that example, like our guest is inspired and sees something they didn't otherwise, rather than feeling like they're being sold something. And they can see that authenticity through it. We've also tested showing some of that UGC in our store environment as well, as the guest is determining what to buy and how to wear it, how to style it beyond what they see on the mannequin.
Yeah, I think I love how it brings diversity to life in a really meaningful way. So it's really cool.
So I kind of hesitate to ask you this question, but it's a compliment to the two of you, and maybe not to some of your colleagues, but since you're here, I can't resist, okay? So your
I'm really curious.
Brace yourself.
It's a left-handed compliment to some of your colleagues. So anyways, so over the past decade, obviously you've had some phenomenal collaborations, and the one that really, I mean, they've been going on for a long time, but the one that really, knocked it out of the box was the Missoni collaboration. You went back and did it a second time. I teach sometimes at FIT, so I hear the students talk, and their question always is, and mine too, I won't blame it on them, is that why is it that you have this incredible marketing promotion and you do these extraordinary things, and somehow, even when they're 12 years old, when they get to me, they're 18, they remember this Missoni thing, and then invariably or inevitably, you get to the store and nothing is there. And so all this fantastic effort has been put into it. And if it were just a one-off, I wouldn't say anything. But then the question is, where's the disconnect once they get to the store? Because you said it yourselves, 80% of the business is done in the stores. So what's happening there? And then the second part of that, if you don't mind, is what is your schedule for doing that? What's the thought process? Seems like easy money to me, and maybe you want to keep it scarce. So that's part two. Thank you.
Easy money costs money.
Yeah. Do you want to start?
Okay, in terms of the store versus the digital business, it's interesting. I think there's a stat out there that says we have a Target store within 5 miles of 75% of the population. That said, what we know is consumers that we're not capturing, proximity is an issue, right? Like getting to the store. So our digital business is really important in providing access to those that don't have a Target down the street. In terms of the scarcity demand model, it's one that requires a fine balance. We have done it where we have a lot of inventory and it sits there. Designers don't want to work, one, with a discount retailer, so we overcome that hurdle. Two, they don't want to see their product on clearance, and they don't want to see it on the floor for months at a time. And then they definitely don't want to see it at any of like the salvage stores down the road. So we have a really fine balance that we try to strike. And even when we've increased our demand, it just keeps increasing. So I don't know that we've necessarily hit the ceiling on the right designers. We do have some designers where the product has sat there for a while. And so it's when you have those timeless, well-known designers that span many generations because of who they are, that's typically when it happens. So it happened with the Lilly Pulitzers, it happened with the Missonis, the Liberties of Londons, but those are far and few in between.
And those aren't the easy money ones either. I mean, I think we've created the playbook on this, and so we've made it look easy, but it's not. And to the point of scarcity, we've built up this model where our guest knows this is going to go fast. I have to get in, right? And so that's what we want. That piece of it is intentional. And then you're right. It's this balance of not all stores do sell the same way, right? So you have to take a very segmented approach and be in the right inventory, in the right place for the right guest. And for those big ones, like we know they're going to sell out immediately, and we're okay with that.
That's also the first question we ask. The first question we ask, we're like, what's the turn on this? Is it going to be 5 hours? Is it a day? Is it 2 weeks? So it's definitely one of the first things that we talk about.
And that
Regional from Sony said that their business, I asked her after this, I said, what does that do for your business? She said, improves it. And I said, how can you? And she said, it works well.
It's a total lift.
Like the Costco UGG thing, and it works regardless. So it's great for them as well.
Yeah.
And if you think about brand partnerships too, it's like you borrow cachet from both brands and then you combine it in a way that you couldn't get it from either one individually. So I think that's, like accessibility and design. Those are the two things that Target does really well, and that's the ethos of the brand. And so a Missoni couldn't be afforded by somebody maybe at some point in time, but they can in that partnership. So there's a alignment in terms of democratizing design that Target is always really focused on. And I think with that, you think about just retail in general, the demand and supply is a conversation we always talk about. I'm a sneaker person, and I'm like, how can I get this? Again, 3 a.m., this thing is dropping. It's Target, it's Nike. And, I'm disappointed, but then I'm also eager for the next one, right? And so it creates that energy about, being able to get the next thing. And then you build the buzz and the energy and the excitement, right? You share tips and tricks, all of those things. But it's conversational and it's brand building for sure.
You also asked about timing. It depends on how many big ones we can get versus small ones, and that pipeline goes years out. What I will tell you is 2024 is going to be an incredible year.
Brace yourself.
Is that the mic drop moment? That might be the mic drop moment.
I don't know that we can create enough demand for it, so I would say it's going to be a great
Be
year.
ready. Get those thumbs ready. Get those feet ready for the store footprint.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, I'm going to say, Mary Beth, Jasmine, Lauren, thank you very much.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
conversation.